a WERKS modified basket, even a used one, versus just buying a new OEM basket. Price is not that different, but which one is the best value? Which one works the best? I'm going to try to show you a little bit about the new baskets that are available. There have been improvements over the years in these, but the design problems that have always been in them are still there. And while some have said the latest generation don't go bad, I think I can show you that they indeed do. These four baskets are all the later style from 2014 and up. This is a 2015 with 15,000 miles on it that's already been drilled apart. This is a 2020 basket with 18,000 miles on it out of a DL 1050. This is a 2014 with 40,000 miles on it, DL 1000. And this is a brand new out of the box, fresh from Suzuki 2020 basket, the latest style, the Y20 generation they call them. I'm going to take these apart and show you a little bit about the wear in them and why it does what it does in this video, just to give you some insight on what needs fixed in these and why buying a new basket from Suzuki isn't as good as having your old basket modified by WERKS, or even buying a new basket with full WERKS modifications. Now first up, we've got the brand new basket. These are very tight. One thing, they're not broken in, if you will, so they're very hard to move regardless. You can only get just a very slight amount of movement in that gear. As you can see, you got to look close, but it will move. And that's very similar to what a WERKS basket will have when it's done. This 2020 basket with 18,000 miles on it has started to loosen a little bit. You can see that gear moving back and forth. That's already a sign that the bearing's wearing and the inner plate is starting to wear. This basket with 40,000 miles on it, very easy to move. And you can see the bearing is worn, because you probably can't see it on the video, but I can see the slop up, there you can see it. That's the slop up and down in the bearing, plus the inner plate is worn pretty bad in it. So let me get these drilled out and cleaned up a little bit, and we'll see what goes on inside. Alright, we've got these cleaned up good enough to do the video with. Wanted to show you something about the bearing clearances and how they change them. This is the brand new basket, never been run before. And as you can tell, there's a little bit of, just a very little bit of movement in that. And that's the way it should be. You got to have a little bit in there for oil clearances, but that's almost imperceptible, pretty tight. Here is it's also a 2020, but this one has 18,000 miles on it. And this rider's pretty easy on baskets as that goes. He's not pulling a wheelie every time he leaves a stoplight, for instance. And with 18,000 miles, I know you can hear that. And you should be, like, judging by the stop post here, you can see some movement. At 18,000 miles, that's already gained that much clearance in that bearing. If we go to this is 2015 with only 15,000 miles on it. Look at that. Now, one of the differences there, the 17 down to 14 models don't have a machined finish here. It's a machine finish, but it's not a ground finish, not a very good finish. And the tolerances weren't as good back then, but you can see the difference right there. That's already got quite a bit of slop at 15,000 miles. Here's a 2014 basket with 40,000 miles. And you can see and hear that. That causes a lot of problems with vibration, with how the basket lines up with the clutch discs under load, and it just gets worse with wear. And one of the things I showed you on that other basket about that finish, if you can see on this one, that's a ground finish, much smoother. One thing all the WERKS modified baskets get is the gear surface checked, and on the older ones especially, they're all going to get remachined to a smoother finish. Now these 2018 and up baskets come with a ground finish, which is a nice finish. It's also slightly larger diameter. but we also like to check and see if it's on center compared to the hub bore. If you can see in this video, I've got this one about as well centered as you're going to get on a scroll chuck here. There's very little run out on it, 5/10 or so. That's very good. Now let's set it back here and see what it is on the ground surface. I just checked the new gear earlier, and it was very good. It was about 1/1000th run out, so that's exceptionally good actually. So let's see what we get on this one. Since the hub is centered, that's what everything runs off of. We want this to be pretty much exactly on center too. As you can see, that one, you dial that back into a 0, just a little over 1/1000th off. If you take up what it was off center to start with, that's excellent. So they may be, but the fact they're grinding this gear, this may be more an exact gear surface, and the way it's in relation to the hub, it may be more in place than the previous generation. I'm going to check a couple of the other ones and see how they look, and we can compare that. But we already know that the bearing wear has not been solved. This is the 2015 DL 1000 basket with 15,000 miles on it. Centered up on the inner hub pretty good there. Let's check and see if there's any run out in this one. Now this is a perfect example of why I check each and every one of these. We're 2.5 thousandths off center with this bearing surface compared to the hub where everything starts from. 2.5 thousandths off center before you even start adding the tolerance stacking into the rest of the parts. I've seen these worse than this one, but this is what I eliminate when I build these things. You don't, if you let something be that far off and then the next part's that far off, that all stacks up. Now the other three that I checked were all good. They were within 1/1000ths. I checked the new one, the 2020 with 15,000 miles on it, and the one with 40,000 miles on it. They were within 1/1000ths or so. That's good. But this one, I don't want that in my bike, new or used. And when I get done with it, that'll be undercut, so where that's within a few tenths of being perfectly on center, that means the basket mounted to it will be perfectly on center. And from there, all the parts fit perfectly and work perfectly. I'm kind of getting towards the end of showing what's inside of these to start with. I want to show you the plate movement. That's the root of the real problem of chutter, and it has to be fixed so it can never happen again. That's what the WERKS modifications do. This brand new basket, this inner plate is what the springs push against. It has a little bit of play in it from the factory. That would be okay if it stayed there, but it doesn't. That progressively gets worse. Here's the 2020, and again the 2018 and up have the ground bearing finishes and all that stuff to make them better, but they really haven't done much to address this plate wear since around 2010. They come up with a slightly tighter casting, and it does start out tighter, and it takes a little bit longer for them to get loose. But as you can see, with 18,000 miles on it, the very latest basket from Suzuki, look at the difference in inner plate movement in just 18,000 miles. Now this is already the point where the springs are starting to hit the aluminum part of the basket in 18,000 miles. That's not acceptable. This basket was just starting to show some problems. Now this 2015 with 15,000 miles on it, less mileage than that one. Let's compare it. Now these don't have the ground gear finish and stuff like that, but they have the same number 2 basket casting, which we can see this right here. I think if you look at, well, there's a number 2 right there, and this 05G37 number is smaller than the earlier baskets. That's the latest casting there is, and it has tighter spring pocket windows. And that lets this plate fit tighter to start with. But again, 15,000 miles, and look at that. That's quite a bit of play. Here we have a 14 with 40,000 miles. This basket was already causing lots of problems. And you can see the difference, just how much movement there is in that. And of course you can see where the springs were heavily embedding into the basket already. Now this is what I call average wear at this time. I've seen them where this plate goes clear around to where it actually hits this stop post before it quits moving back and forth. When they get to that point, they're really vibrating and making a lot of noise. The metallic slapping noise you get from a worn clutch basket that goes away some when you pull in the clutch lever, that's this noise right here. That's the noise going back and forth right there, and that's caused by the pistons firing, pushing it this way, and then when between the firing cycles it goes back the other way, and then it has to be hammered back that way. What happens under chutter, that back and forth movement isn't controlled well, and it becomes like a harmonic vibration that just gets completely out of control, which is what we know as chutter. Now, when these are modified, and all these will be modified here, even the new one, this is machined and fixed to the basket in a way where it can never ever move again. It's also exactly on center in the basket, so it matches the bronze 660 bearing that I will bore in the basket out to fit the bronze 660 bearing and finish it to fit the gear we just looked at, within a thousandth of where it's supposed to be too. So that makes a good foundation for the rest of it. I do some other things to the baskets I won't get into here, but this is to show that the new OEM basket out of the box works great for a while, but it starts going downhill from day one because there's nothing to keep this from wearing, and there's nothing to keep that main bearing from wearing. This basket, the aluminum basket's got a large chamfer on either side of it. There's very little, it's very narrow bearing surface. Mine are wider, and this is very soft aluminum, and it just will not take the wear that this particular V-twin puts on it with its cycles of firing. Like a Hayabusa has a lot more power, and has a very similar clutch basket, but it has 4 cylinders, so 4-cylinder impulses, and it's just smoother. The V-twin power pulses are like hammers hitting these, and that's part of why this design doesn't hold up. So we have to re-engineer that to accept the loads and not wear from them